Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Be so many stories that change throughout the day into the evening, especially during college hoop season. And so Kentucky is getting ready to play LSU, okay? Kentucky, it's senior day. There's a lot of pomp. There's a lot of circumstance. They're letting, saying goodbye, if you will, to a lot of the guys that kind of came in and helped change the program in year one under Mark Pope. But I think what's worth noting, there is an interesting note about senior day and one guy that doesn't appear as though he will be honored on senior day. It is guard Kerr Kriisa. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the story. Interesting note from the other day. But like I said, it's been an up and down year for Kentucky. Listen, I've said it. I feel bad. I do because, my whole thing is, listen, only one team's going to win the national championship. It's going to be whoever. Maybe this year it's Auburn. Maybe this year it's Houston, Kentucky, Duke, whatever. But you want to see everybody at full strength. You want to see everybody at full strength and kind of just see how the chips fall. And if your team's not good enough, they're not good enough. And that's just part of sports and part of life. Okay. Well, I bring it up because Kentucky is a little bit different in that we saw them at full strength and they're awesome. And they beat a lot of really good teams. They beat Duke at full strength. They beat Florida at full strength, pretty close to full strength. They beat Gonzaga at pretty close to full strength. How about this? They swept Tennessee not at full strength. And so this is a team that at their best, I still believe can play with just about anybody. By the way, close to full strength against Alabama. That was back and forth, could have gone either way the first time those two teams played at Rupp. So in my opinion, that was a team that could absolutely play with anybody, but the injuries have just been devastating and they just continue to mount day after day after day, game after game after game. And you really have to kind of go back to basically early part of December when this team was at full strength. We know Jackson Robinson's out for the year. He's been dealing with that wrist injury for about 3-4 weeks, tried to come back, couldn't play. Lamont Butler was out with the shoulder injury, comes back, hurts it again. Now he's back. Again, we're recording before the LSU game, but feels like he's at less than 100%. Andrew Carr in and out of the lineup. But the one that started this all, it was Kerr Kriisa back in that Gonzaga game back in December. People were like, oh, he's not really playing that well. It turns out he had a freaking broken foot, basically, okay? And so since he hurt that foot, there's been talk about, could he be back in 6 to 8 weeks? Could he be back by early February? Could he be back by late February? And I think Mark Pope has said all the right things, and I think Kerr Kriisa has said all the right things too. I don't know that he's done any media availability, but I do remember him chatting with a fan on a video that got recorded or whatever, and he basically told the fan I just want to play this year. I want to help this team this year. But as time has gone on, it feels like he's not coming back. And because he played so few games, it appears as though he could potentially get a medical red shirt. Well, that's not just my opinion. That's not just speculation, but it appears as though Mark Pope confirmed that in his call-in show on Monday. So on Monday night, all of the guys who are going to be honored at senior day for Kentucky had a dinner. It was Lamont Butler. It was Jackson Robinson. It was Ansley Almanor. It was Amari Williams. It was Andrew Carr. It might have been one or two other guys as well. But the guy that was most notably not there was Kerr Kriisa. Well, on his show, Mark Pope dropped some interesting quotes. Producer Matt, if you have the great Jack Pilgrim's tweet, go ahead and pop that up. Jack Pilgrim tweeted out, Mark Pope said tonight, Kerr Kriisa was not invited to the dinner, only players officially out of eligibility. Mark Pope said, quote, on the show, it's just for the guys that have zero college eligibility left, just those 6 guys. Kerr's got another year left, which is fantastic for all of us, right? Got to say, that sure does sound like Mark Pope saying that Kerr Kriisa is going to come back without actually saying it. And so what I would say about that is a couple things. One, first of all, for the last time, I promise, we are recording before the LSU game on Tuesday. So there's a very good chance that Mark Pope will address this at some point in the post-game media availability. Maybe it becomes official by the time that you listen to this. But what I would just say, this is a great piece of news for Kentucky basketball. I think it's a good piece of news for Kerr Kriisa as well. One, first of all, don't want to rush back I'm not a doctor. I don't know if there's potential for long-term injury. I'll leave that up to the doctors. Okay. But at the same time, I do think if you rush back, you run the risk of potentially hurting yourself on a more permanent long-term basis. So you don't want to rush back. And I think at this point, you don't want to rush back to a team that's kind of banged up anyway. I mean, are you rushing back to a team that, again, we don't know how healthy Lamont Butler is. Jackson Robinson's out for the year. Andrew Carr's been dealing with a back injury. So you're not returning to a team that I think any of us right now feel like, okay, they're in that upper tier, the way we felt after the Duke game, after the Florida game, etc. You're returning to a team that's inherently flawed, inherently banged up, and maybe it just isn't Kentucky's season. I think beyond that, for Kerr Kriisa, it makes a ton of sense. Get healthy, but more importantly, like, with due respect, you're not an NBA player, okay? We just spent a ton of time talking about Cooper Flagg, how much money he could be making in college, how much money he will make as the number one pick in the NBA draft. But the truth of the matter is, let's call it what it is. Kerr Kriisa is not an NBA player. As somebody who kind of sort of knows what these European contracts look like, I don't think he's in line to get crazy money as a pro next year if he decides to go pro. Now, if he decides to go pro, I have no problem with it. But the bottom line is college basketball is now paying more than really just about anything other than basically first-round guaranteed NBA contracts. It's just the truth. And so if you're Kerr Kriisa, after not playing for the last 2 months, you're going to declare, you're going to try to go through the draft process, you're going to go through the draft process after not having played high-leverage basketball for the last 2 months. Doesn't really make sense to me. And so it makes sense to come back. And I would lastly say, from the Kentucky side of things, you got to be fired up. Because if you look at the state of Kentucky basketball next year, I think it's actually probably in a little bit better shape than I would have said maybe a month and a half ago. Bottom line is, all those freshmen that got called into action, all those young guys that got called into action, they're all stepping up and delivering in a way that I don't think I thought they would. I don't think I thought Trent Noah was going to be this good. I don't think I thought Travis Perry was going to be this good. I don't think I thought Colin Chandler was going to be this good. So all of those guys have gotten valuable reps. You have the 3 really talented freshmen coming in, Caden Lewis, Jasper Johnson, Malachi Moreno. But those aren't 3 freshmen that are just going to come in and dominate college basketball. No disrespect, but they're not Cooper Flagg. They're not Cade Cunningham. They're not Zion Williamson. They're not Anthony Davis. They're not De'Aaron Fox. And so to have a potential veteran point guard on your roster to help those guys, I just think you got to be fired up if you're a Kentucky fan. Listen, fired up is relative, right? You don't want injuries. You don't want guys being hurt. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that in a perfect world, he plays this year, the whole team's healthy, and he compete for a national championship. But he is hurt. He's not rushing back. Now you have a 6th-year point guard who, by the way, has won a Big 12 or won a Pac-12 regular season title, has won a Pac-12 tournament title, has been part of multiple, at least one number 1 seed, has played at 3. He's a vet. He's going to be 25 years old next year. He just turned 24. That's the kind of guy you want in that locker room for those young guys, and really a young roster in general, where you have a couple freshmen that roles grew this year, but how much? And then 3 really young freshmen as well. So if you're a Kentucky fan, again, in a perfect world, you would have loved to have this kid, no issues, no whatever, but the world isn't perfect. And if you're going to get him back, you could do a lot worse than getting him back, getting him back with next year's team that, as I see being pointed out in the chat, you have 2 freshman guards on this year's team. You're going to have 2 freshmen next year. It's going to be good to have a 6th-year guy, and it appears as though Kerr Kriisa will be back.